Something that is near and dear to all of your hearts. Login and reg.
Yeah.
So let's just talk about some of the little pieces that we need to have in place. We did some stuff with session actually earlier in the stack, and that's what we're going to need for login reg, because essentially we need to keep track of who the current user is, and that's why we need session. Because normal HTTP requests don't really know anything about what came before them or what's going to come after. So let's go into, I've got a couple things open here, the packages that we're going to need. This is Express Session. We're going to install that. So let me go to my project here. I'm in our lovely authors project. Let's go npm install Express Session. And then the other thing we're going to install is this module called bcrypt. Okay, and what bcrypt is going to do is it's going to allow us to encrypt, or basically hash the passwords, so that when we're storing something in the database, we're not simply storing a plain text password. So if you ever find that a website, let's say you forget your password and you click the forget password thing, and then that website sends you whatever your current password is, well, you know something's wrong. What's the problem then?
They were actually aware of your password and able to send it directly back to you.
They're storing it in plain text.
Yeah.
Because this hashing mechanism is supposed to be such that it's sort of a one-way hash. So you take something and you hash it, and you compare it against the hash that you're storing in your database. You don't actually store a plain text password. Because if someone hacks into your database, well, now they've got all the passwords of all your users if you're storing those in plain text. So we're going to use this bcrypt in order to hash up the passwords that our users are generating. So let's add that as well. We can do them both at one time, like this. Oh, I guess I need to make this bigger, right? Slowly.
Now that you see me?
Yeah, no, you didn't even have to remind me, so I must be having a good day.
At this point, you can just see me and then realize.
Yeah.
Must be a good day here. And my
Reminder, and she's still awake. So.
yeah, let's see how long that lasts.
Yeah.
So cool. I got these two things tacked on. I've got my Express Session and my bcrypt. Probably the first thing that we're going to do is we're just going to create some routes on our back end in order to actually facilitate logging in and creating new users. So let's go and create a, just going to fold that up. So let's create a new model, because we do need to have a user model. So let's do this, user.js. What do I need to bring into my model? Everyone? Someone? Mongoose. Okay, acquire mongoose. And then, next thing I need to do is create my actual schema. So we'll say const user schema is going to be new mongoose.schema. Whoops. And what's going to be in our schema? So I think we're just going to store a couple things, keep things simple. We're just going to have an email and a password. That's it. Alright, so email is going to be a type of string. And there are other validations that we could do on this if I wanted to, but I'm just going to say that it is required. And we'll say true, and then the customized message will just be you must supply an email. Okay. Now the other thing that we're going to store here is the password. And we'll say the type is a string again. Required. Whoops. So that's just an array. And then the first argument is whether it's required. The second argument is the actual error message if it's not supplied. You must supply a password. Okay. All right, and then as always, we're going to do our little timestamps thing down here. Stamps, true. Okay. Then what else do we have to do inside this file?
Name.
What? Yes, that's
Oh, he's
correct.
talking about that.
We have to register our model. All right. So we'll call this the user model, and then we will pass it in that user schema. Okay. Now let's check if we're actually requiring this currently. So inside my config, or actually inside my server, this is where I'm taking in everything, right? And I bring in this mongoose file. Is my mongoose file currently bringing in all my scheme or all my models? Not yet, right? So let's change this up. Instead of just requiring this, let's do a little fancy shorthand. fs equals require fs. And then instead of doing this, I'm just going to do fs.read dir sync. And then I need to create a models path. So my models path is going to be, where is it? It's going to be back one level and then inside models. So we'll say it's the current directory that we're in, and then I'm going to go back one and then into models. Okay. So we're going to do read dir sync, and that's going to take in the path that I'm looking for, which is my models path. Okay, and then let's do a for each through those. So we're going to for each through each file. And I'm going to say if that file, so file.index of, yeah, you're nice and up close. If it has a .js in it, let's require that file. So say require models path plus a / and then the name of that file. Whoops, not like that. We want the actual file name, which is going to be that. Okay. So now we should be successfully requiring all of our models, not just the author, but also the user. So let's go into a terminal here and actually fire this thing up. Node mon. All right. So we seem to be okay thus far. So now we've got our user model. The other thing we need to do is we have to create some routes to actually interact with our user model. So probably we're going to want a user controller, right? Let's create users controller. And what do I need inside here? This, mongoose, right? Why do I want mongoose? Because I want to get a reference to my model, my user model. Okay, so we'll say const user equals mongoose dot model. Take our user model there. Okay, and then we're going to create some methods to do a few things. So probably the only things that we need to do are we're going to need to create new users. We're also going to need to log in users. And what else? Log out. I think we're going to leave off log out, but you guys will be able to figure that out anyway. And then we'll do get the current user. So just find out who the current user is. All right. So let's do, we're going to module.exports, which means we're giving it this object. And our object is going to have some different methods. So let's say we'll have a login method, which takes in a request and a response. I'm not really going to have these things do anything just yet, but and then we'll have create, takes in a request and a response, and then we'll just say get request and response. Okay, so these are the methods that I'm going to want to have, And then inside of our routes, now we have to connect these methods that we haven't really yet written, but we can just kind of plug them in. So let's say down here we'll have app.post, and then we'll post to API/users. This is just going to be where we're going to create a new user. All right. So before we even do this, let's actually bring in our users controller. Acquire, controllers, and then we'll say users. Okay. So the method that I want for posting to users is just going to be my create method. So users controller.create. Okay. Then we're going to have, maybe we'll go app.post, we'll say API/users/login, and that's going to be our login method. And then the other one is we're just going to get the current user, so we'll just say app.get API users current. And then that's going to be the get method, right? Is that what I called it?
You mean like
Get.
show page?
Yeah, but again, this isn't going to be a page because remember our API is not really presenting pages. It's just sending data back to our front end. Yeah. So that's all we've got for now. What we need to do in order to be able to do anything with session is obviously we have to plug that into our app because I've installed it, but I haven't actually put it inside of our app yet. So inside of our server.js, let's bring in session. So say const session equals require, and it's called express session. And then we'll just glance here at the documentation and see which what things we need to provide to use session. Whoops, I'm in bcrypt. So here, let's look at what an example looks like. So we're just going to do app.use, and then we're going to pass it session, and then session is going to be invoked with an object, and this object has all these different options for us. So it's got our secret, our resave, and our save uninitialized, which basically means if we save uninitialized, it means we're going to save a session whether or not we make any changes to anything in the session. So if I do a whole request but I don't make any changes to the session, it's still going to save it for me. Cookie secure, we're going to leave that out because obviously we're not doing an HTTPS website here. So let's just take this part and I'll kind of modify it slightly. So after this, let's say we're going to do something like this. Keyboard cat, I'll change it to some super secret. Okay, and then I was just going to take off this cookie part because we're not doing secure. Cool, hasn't broken yet, so we're in pretty good shape.
What does that save uninitialized does?
Essentially what that means is that if we pass through a whole request cycle and we don't make any changes to the session, do we want to save it and keep it around, or do we want to just discard it?
So this case,
Yeah, so in this case, if we save uninitialized, that means that we're always going to have a session no matter what situation. Whether or not we save anything to the session, it will be there. Depending on how you're doing your app, you may or may not want that to be. And some of these options are explained in here. So if I go in here, save uninitialized. Oops. Okay, so here's what this means. Forces a session that is uninitialized to be saved to the store. A session is uninitialized when it is new but not modified. Okay, So if we go through a whole response or request response cycle and we don't save anything to the session, in this case, it will still keep that session live. If I put false in there, it would basically throw that session away after that request because we did nothing to it and there was nothing saved in it. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
Sure. Okay, so our session should be working now. Now we can actually implement some things in our user's controller to interact with it. So let's say when we first we'll just try to create a user because that's probably the most important thing. So what we're going to take in when we create a user is going to be what? What do you think we're going to create the user from? Anyone? Well, what are we going to use to create our user? What did you say? Rec.body, yeah, that's correct. And then the other thing that we want to do is actually bring in this bcrypt module in order to hash up the password that they've provided. Okay, so let's say const bcrypt equals require bcrypt. Bring that up. Okay, so and then let's kind of glance at what we need to do with bcrypt too, so that we are on point here. So what we're doing is going to be this function here. So bcrypt has this function called hash, which is going to take in, as you can see, my plain text password, and then it's going to take the number of salt rounds that we want to do when we're hashing that password. So a higher number of rounds means that it's going to require more computation power from the computer. I think we're going to stick with something like eight rounds, like that. So the higher the number of rounds, the more hashed up it's going to get. All right. So let's just grab this guy. Actually, we probably don't need this. But essentially, here's what the callback function is going to take. It's going to take an error and then a hash. This is the hash of the password that we took in. So that's what we want to store in our database, not the plain text. Okay, so when we get this request to save user, let's just check to see if they even supplied a password, because if they didn't, they're instantly out. We're just gonna error that out. So we'll say if rec, let's see, if no rec.body.password, then let's just return, oops, res.json. We'll say results failed. Okay. So we're not going to do like a bunch of front-end validation today. I'll leave that to you guys. But essentially what we're going to do is, so once we get past this, we know that they've actually supplied a password and that the password has at least a character in it, because in JavaScript, an empty string is falsy, which means that we would get inside this here. All right, so let's hash that password that they gave us. So we'll use the bcrypt.hash. Hash, and then as you can see, we want to pass in the actual data, which is going to be rec.body.password. Salt rounds, we're just going to go with 8 for that one. And then we have this callback function, which takes in an error and a hash password. Hash. Okay. So assuming everything went well and we got this hash, let's store that in the database. Okay. So let's go user.create, and what we want to pass to this is just going to be a new user object, and it's going to have the email, which is coming from where, guys? Rec.body. Okay. And then the password is just going to be the hash that we just generated using bcrypt. Okay, so after this, we can again supply a callback function, which would have the error and then the user that we created. And then let's just, for now, console log both of those things. Error, user. Okay, does all this pretty much make sense to you guys? We're hashing the password, and then if the hash is successful, I'm not really doing any error checking here, but assuming it's successful, then we're just going to go in and save this stuff into the database. So let's open up our terminal here, and then we're going to go into Postman to actually test this thing. Oh, I have to restart Postman. Sorry about that. That might take a minute. So what we're going to do to test is we're just going to send a post request to users and see if we can create a new user. And let's see what that logs in there. Is this thing? Oh, there it goes.
Can I take a quick look at your user model?
Oh yeah, sure. You didn't get to see that. Whoa. Hang on 1 second. So it's pretty straightforward. We just did, we're just hanging on to the email and password. Nothing fancy going on here. Okay, so instead of making a request to authors, let's go API users, and we're going to create one. So say the body. So email is going to be Dwight at codingdojo.com. And then your password is going to be password. Alright, let's give this a shot. Must have hit an error because it seems like it's stuck here. Whoops. Oh, you know what? We actually didn't return anything. So everything worked properly. It's just that our we didn't actually send anything back. So that was my mistake. So here we go. We've got his password. That was the hash that was created from bcrypt. You see it down there? That really long string. And then we've got his email here. So we've got our created at, updated at. And then let's change this so that we actually send back some type of response so that the front end knows, you know, this worked. We successfully created user. So here, if this works, we're in here and we're going to do res.json results success. Okay, so we successfully created a user. And what's the other thing that we probably want to do once we've created that user? Can anyone guess? Anyone? Bueller? No. Well, do we want to make that user log in again after we've just created him? No, not really, right? We want to have him logged in. So how do we tell our application that this person is logged in? Put it in the session. Yeah, we'll just save, you know, maybe save the session ID or the actual user ID inside there.
So we log them in after he gets created?
Correct. Yeah, so let's just do that automatically so he doesn't have to go back to a login screen and do that. So we'll do something like, the way that we add this is we'll do rec.session, and then we could just say something like user ID equals the user, the created user, ._ID. So that corresponds to the ID that we have down here in our created user objects. Right? Okay. The next thing that I want to do is actually create our login function. So now we're definitely able to create users, and that's a good thing. And actually, I just realized we probably want to create one more thing up here in our user model. Let's say that this has to be unique. Does that make sense? We don't really want to have two users that have the same email address. Okay. So, ensure index, use
And
create
that
index.
actually checks for duplicate emails. The unique.
Yeah, it's gonna error out if you try to create a new user with the same email address. So,
Will that work for any parameter?
And if you want the validation number of users, because it's what
well, let's see what happens here. Let's just get an error when we try to specify the same thing. So if I'm here and I try to create Dwight again, actually, hold on. Let me get rid of this deprecation warning. So we have to use create indexes instead, and I believe that's in our Mongoose options here. So if I go create indexes, is that what it said? Yeah. Oh, jeez. Is it create index? All right, I'm not going to deal with this deprecation warning right now. But there is a way to handle this by adding something to your options object in Mongoose. It's going to give you that, it's going to growl at you like that if you use unique true. But there is a way to clear it. Just look that one up. Or you can ask me later on. I just don't want to deal with it right now. So let's try to create a user with the same email and see what happens here. If I look back here, I actually got my app is crashing. This is how the error would look inside your create. It would look like error message E11000 duplicate key error collection. Okay, so you'd have to have error handling inside your creation mechanism, like inside here. So right in here, when we have a potential error, we would have to handle that, and then we would have to ask if the error code was this specific code right here, 11,000. That means that we had a duplicate issue. Okay. It looks a little different than the other validations you guys have been doing because those ones had a path directly to the thing that you were concerned about, right? It would be like email, here's the problem there, whatever. The duplicate one has to be handled slightly differently. But let's just keep moving on that for now. So let's take care of our login functionality. So in our login, all I'm going to take in is just going to be an email and a password. So the first thing that I want to do is actually find out, do I have a user with this specific email? Because if I do, then I could try to check the password and see if that's legitimate. So let's go user.findOne. And then the query that we're going to run is the email should be the rec.body.email. And then I'm going to have a callback again with an error and a user. So if user, then let's just console log them out. And then if there's not a user, actually let's send that back because I don't want to not be sending anything back. So let's just say res.json. We'll say the user was the user that we just found. All right. If not, actually, let's just res.json the user anyway, because it'll either be null or it'll be an actual user. Okay. All right, so let's send a login request to our login page and see if we can find our user. All right, so I'm going to change this to users/login. Email is Dwight. Okay. All right, making sense. So we actually found our user, and we see he's got that hash password and everything. So now the only other thing we really need to check is, did the password that he supplied us with, did that match the one, we're going to hash it again and then match that up against the one that's stored in our database. So let's do this. So if there's no user, I'll say if there's no user, return res.json, I don't know, result failed. And I'm going to be really vague about this because we don't really want to tell anyone on the front end that, hey, that email does not exist in our database. Or we don't want to tell them that password is wrong. Basically, we're just going to tell them, check your email and password. Maybe it's a bad email, maybe it's a bad password, it doesn't matter, because if you give them more information, then obviously they can say, oh, the email was right, let me try some different passwords and see if I can get in, right? So if that's the case, let's just return result failed, else let's check to see if the hash password matches. So here's the function that we need for that. We need to actually use this bcrypt.compare. We're going to take in the password that the user gives us and then provide it the hash that we got from the database, and then we're going to have a callback function. Okay, so let's go bcrypt.compare, and then we're going to take the password in, so that's going to be rec.body.password, and then the encrypted password is just going to be the user we got from our database, .password. And then we're going to have a function that takes in an error and I believe it's a result if I remember correctly. Yeah, so res is just the result in this. Don't get confused with express as res. In express, res means response. Okay, so this is just the result. Okay, so let's just console, or we'll return, whoops, let's go res.json, the result. So we'll send that back to Postman for now. See what that looks like. Okay, so up in here, when I make my login request, I'm also going to supply a password. And the password that we picked for Dwight was nice and easy to remember. Password. So let's try to log in and see what happens here. Result was true. Okay, so the fact that the result was true tells me that the provided password, when that got hashed, it matched the one that we had in our database. So he's good to go. And if I change this to something else, I should get a false on that. Make sense? All right. So let's do our logic based on that. If the result was true, so if result, and we can do, that's the shorthand, this would just say if this thing is not falsy, if it's truthy, then let's return res.json results success. So we successfully logged in. What's the other thing that we want to do when we log in?
Store it in session.
Store it in the session, correct. So let's do, actually before this return, let's go rec.session.userid equals the user._id. Alright. So we're storing that, and then we're going to send them back this thing saying success. If this was not successful, the final thing that we want to do is we want to just res.json result failed. Didn't work. Okay, so again, if I provide a bad password, I'll get this result failed. And this is what we're going to be looking out for on our front end. Did this thing work, right?
So
Okay.
this will display in your front end later on.
Well, it won't. It's not that it will display. It's that we'll be interacting with it in order to determine did we successfully log in. Okay, so So we're pretty good there. We've got our main functions. We've got in our login and our create. The only other thing we need to do is get our current user. So what we want to do is check to see if there's a user ID stored in session. Does that make sense? All right. So let's say if, let's just say const user ID equals rec.session.user ID. And then if we don't have one, so if no user ID, we're going to return res.json user is null. Otherwise, we're going to go grab it from the database. So if we get this far, let's do user.find. Let's go find by ID, and then we'll just pass in that user ID that we have. User. Okay. And then really the only thing I want to pass back about my user is probably its email address, because I don't want to pass back his password hash. That doesn't really make any sense, right? So if we find the user, let's do res.json user, and then we're just going to say his email is the user.email that I just got from my database. Okay. So the next thing we're going to do to test this is we're just going to log in with the username and password that we know, and then we'll test getting the current user to see if he's still logged in, because he should be, right? All right. So let's go.
That's the whole purpose of this method,
The get method.
check if the user is in the session.
Right. So in our front end application, we want to block when we want to block users from a specific page. We can simply make a call to this get current user, and if we find out that there is no current user, let's just route them back to the LoginReg page. Yeah. So let's try logging in here. Give it the right password. Password. Okay, so that was successful. And then let's do a get request to users/current. There we go. So we've got our current user, and all I'm passing back is the email, because I don't want to pass back your hash password. No reason to do that. So essentially all of our methods are working the way that we expect. We can create a user, we can log one in, and we can get the current user. So now the only thing that we really need to do is work out the front end part of it. Okay? So let's get our Angular app up and running here. Oops, I've got some different terminals here. So let's go into the public directory, ng build, watch. Let's open that up. It's localhost 3000. Okay, so here we are at our lovely authors. Oh, I'm sorry. You have a question? Oh, sure. Find by ID. Well, let's recap what we're doing with this method. All we're doing is we're getting the current user, but our front end doesn't need to know what the hash password is, does it? Not really, right? We don't even want anyone to know what the hash passwords are. So if we were to send back the hash password to the front end, well, there's a chance that that could be intercepted and seen by someone who doesn't really have the best intents. So let's just give back the email address. That's not so private, right?
But if you added like name, then you should have.
Yeah. If we were storing name here, I'd probably send that back too. That's fair. Okay, so we've got our app here, but we don't yet have we don't yet have a LoginReg page, so let's create that. Let's go over here to our public again, and then we'll go nggc, and we'll call this LoginReg. Okay, cool. And then in my public directory, I've got inside my app source, I've got my routing as always. So let's go in there and we'll actually have a LoginReg route where we can do all of this stuff. So we'll say route, our path is going to be login, and then the component is going to be our LoginReg component. And lo and behold, it imports that for me. So that's one thing that's kind of nice about Angular.
That's the one.
Yeah, we found the thing right there. Okay, so if I go to login, LoginReg works, so I'm pretty happy about that. So that's always a good thing when our components are working. So let's get this component going. Where did it go though? Does anyone see our LoginReg component? Normally, is it inside some other component? Subcomponent. Update author. Yeah. Where did that go? That's so odd. LoginReg. Oh, you know what? I guess I just need to refresh this. Oh yeah, there it is. I was like, I just created the component and it was gone. Man,
Why isn't it live update?
I don't know.
Weird.
Yeah, usually it does.
First
So I
time
don't
we
know.
found it.
Yeah, that's quite odd.
Oh, for Java, you should watch that.
Yeah, that was pretty strange.
No, refreshing.
Just refreshing.
Yeah, because it won't automatically show up here,
Great.
and it
Thank
causes a lot of errors.
All right, so let's do a couple forms. We're gonna have in our login form and then our reg form. So form, and then inside here I'll just have a div with my label plus
Shortcut in the documentation.
the documentation of what?
HTML, the one you're doing, you do a lot of shortcuts and then when you tab.
This is called Emmet. So Emmet has some shortcuts. Yeah, you can look those up for sure.
it's in there. Okay.
Yeah.
Do I
So
have to install it in the VS Code?
no, VS Code has Emmet enabled by default. Yeah. Yeah, it's automatic. So we've got input. We can even do type on this, which is kind of nice. So I can say input is going to be of type email. And then let's just go up a level. And then we'll do another div. And then in there we'll have a label plus a password, which is going to be of type password. Boom. Whoops.
I go to password. and
Wait,
then
this password part didn't work the way I wanted it to, so I'm not so proud of that. I don't know, let me change that. So that should be an input, and then we're going to make it of type equals password. Okay, name equals password. I don't necessarily have to end my inputs, but so up here, this is going to be my email. This is the label for email. I need a name on this guy for email. And then what's the other thing I need to use if we're binding these guys? You guys remember? Banana in a box, right? Party time. ng model equals. So we'll say this is like user.email. Remember that one? And then down here we're gonna bind this guy, ngModel user.password. Okay. Let me make sure we're. Oh yeah, we're already. Okay, I was gonna make sure we were requiring the forms module, but I know that we are because we were already creating authors and that sort of thing. So we're good to go. So inside the LoginReg component, in order to actually reference those things, I'm gonna have to have a user, and we'll just say this is of type object, and then inside ng on init, I'll say this dot user equals an object has an email that's empty and a password that's empty. All right, and then let's see if this component is still behaving. Seems to be. My labels got messed up, but I don't have any errors, so I'm happy about that. So that's always pleasing to me. So we'll say password here. Okay, and then we want to have some kind of, we want to respond to a submit on this guy. So let's say submit equals submit, or we'll just call this login. That. All right, and then inside my component, I'll just create a little method here so I can log in, and I'm just going to console log this.user when I do that. So if I refresh this and I provide in some stuff, so if I say Dwight at codingdojo.com, password. Oh gosh, I don't even have a submit button. Yeah, it's like really sparse here. All right, let's do that. Okay, now I gotta do this again. Whoa, goodness. I made something mad there. I don't know what it was. Did anyone catch that?
It was less bad the second time.
Something got upset. All right. So at least I'm getting my email and password, so I can do something with that, right? Let's send something through our service. What do you say? So our HTTP service only had methods for authors now. Let's create a new one for users. So we'll say login. And then we're going to provide a, we'll just provide the user object. So that's going to have the email and the password in it. All right. So we're going to return this dot http.post API/users/login, and then we want to pass in the user itself. Okay, so inside the LoginReg component, we actually want to use that as always. So I got to go back in here and actually require it. So import HTTP service from .http server. Everyone all right out there? Oh man, that's some kind of a party foul. Okay. Oh, a laptop fell?
Yeah, but it didn't make it to the floor.
Okay.
Not the laptop.
All right, cool. So all I'm doing here is I'm just importing my HTTP service, and then when I log in, let's use that method. So we'll go this.http.login, and then we're going to provide the this.user, right? And then we have to do what to this? Subscribe, right? Okay, we'll say the data. Response is any, and I'm just going to console log my response. Okay, so let's go up in here and let's try to log him in. So if I go to Dwight, loading, password. Awesome. So we got a result of success. If we have that, we probably are going to want to redirect to say all authors, something like that, right? So let's just bring in our router so that we can actually redirect. So up here, we'll import router from Angular router. And then I always have to inject this. So let's just turn that there. Okay, and we'll say private router is an instance of router. And so if this works, so if response dot result equals success, I'm going to want to do this dot router dot navigate. Is it just to all authors, I think? So we're just going to send them to all authors. All right, so let's try that one more time with the redirection. Here, Dwight, password. Whoa. Can't match any routes authors. Was that not one of our routes? Oh, it's just the root route, right? So my mistake. So when we redirect, whoops, let's just go straight here. All right, let's try that again. Get this right. Dwight, encoding, password. Hey, okay, all right, we're in business here. So we can log in. Now we got to be able to create a user, right? We're in pretty good shape here. So let's go back here to login. We need one more form. Okay, and I want to do div label plus input of type email. And then I want to go up one level. We'll go another div that's going to have a label and an input. And then I'm also going to go up one level or two levels and create a button. Not bad, right? I wish it was formatted better for me, but it wasn't. So I kind of got to do some cleaning up here. Alright, there's our label. Whoa, that was messed up too. So let me drag this out of here. Okay, there we go. So this type was going to be password, of course, and then name, and then we're going to bind this again. So banana in a box, and then this is going to be new user dot password. Okay, and then up here I want to get rid of this and just say the name is going to be email, and then the binding is going to be ngModel equals, whoops, new user dot email. Okay, and then we'll put these little labels in here, email, password. And I've got my button to submit. Cool. Oh, why did I call that button? You guys didn't stop me. All right, that means someone fell asleep. So in here,
That's not true. That's not
you
true.
guys are as wide awake as I've ever
Found me
seen
right
you.
here.
I'm loving it. Okay, so we'll say new user is also an object. It's just a different one. And then in my onInit, we'll say this dot new user is going to be that same sort of thing. Blank. Okay. Cool. Some semis in there. All right, so we're in pretty good shape. Let's actually have a submit function for the registration. So inside here, under here, let's go register. And we're going to pretend that we have a method that we haven't yet written. HTTP.register. And then our registration is going to take the new user that we have. And then we're going to subscribe to that, right? So again, we're going to take our response, which is any. And if our response returned a result of success, then let's redirect in the same way that we were doing here, right? So in the body of our function, if response dot result equals success.
Triple equal means is equal to double equal.
Yeah, so the triple equals mean that it is not only means that it's not only the same value, but it is also of the same type. So it's a more strict equality check. Okay. For instance, like if we were comparing the number 5 with the string 5, a double equals would say that those two things are the same, but a triple equals, they would not be the same. Okay? Because the actual type of the thing is different. You've got a string versus a number. Okay, so if it was successful, let's just redirect in the same way that we were doing here. And in fact, I'll just copy this. Same logic. And then inside our HTTP service, we actually have to have a method for this too. So register takes any user, and then we're going to go return this dot underscore HTTP dot post. So I think we're going to API slash users. That's it, right? And then we're going to pass in the user. All right, so let's try creating another user. So I'm going to go back to my login. Wow, these forms are really tight. But and we don't even know which one's which. Maybe I should differentiate. Because, yeah, otherwise it's like, who knows what's doing what here. Okay, so in the top case, we're logging in. So I'll just do like an H3 here. Log in. And then here we're going to have a function for submit. So that's just going to be register like that. And then let's do an H3 with register. Let's see if that's a little better. Okay, great. Now it's kind of clear what we're doing at least. So let's try creating a new user. We'll say this one is going to be Ellie at elliezhao.com. I spelled that wrong, but can you even see that? No, right? Okay, so you have your own website. That's pretty cool. That's right? E-L-L-I-E?
Yeah, Z-H-A-O. Zhao.
Oh, there's no U?
It's A-O.
Oh, A-O. Okay, got it. I could have sworn in the...
See, I told you it's better.
It's still wrong? Z-H-A... Oh, A-U. Oh my god, okay. Alright, cool. Let's try doing this. Alright, so we're good to go. We successfully created a new user. We know because that redirect was only happening if it worked, right? And you guys could obviously write the logic to handle if it didn't succeed, maybe show some errors on that page or whatever. So the only other thing we really want to handle is just or kind of deal with is what if we want to block somebody from a specific page if they're not logged in?
I want that.
What's that?
I want that.
You want that? Okay, yeah. So let's go and decide a page that we want to have, like a user wall or something like that. Let's do it for all authors. Does that sound good? Okay, so inside of all authors, so I've got all authors component here. Let's bring in our HTTP service is already there, but let's just we're going to write a new method in the HTTP service to just get the current user, because we already have a backend route to do that. So let's go get current user, and it doesn't really take anything in. All we're doing is we're doing a GET request, remember? So we're just going to go return this dot underscore HTTP dot get. and then we're going to go API/users/current to get the current user. We don't need to pass that anything. And then inside my authors component, I'm just going to run that method, and if it comes back that I have no user, send them out. All right. So we'll basically like redirect them to the login page. So we're already bringing in our HTTP service. So inside ng on init, let's do something like this .http .get current user. And then what do I need to do with that? Starts with an S. Subscribe, right? Response. And then, so if response.user equals null, we'll just put a little comment in here, not authenticated. So we have no idea who this person is. Theoretically, maybe they're a user, maybe they're not.
This user is the one in the session.
Yeah. So if we're logged in, then we should be okay, and we won't have to redirect. But what we want to do is if we get back null when we get the current user, let's send them away. All right. So if they're not authenticated, let's go this router.navigate, and then we're going to navigate to the login route. Okay. So let's see what happens if we go to all authors for now. Okay, so notice how we got redirected. Do you guys know why that happened? Because I'd already logged in, right?
What is it?
Huh?
What is it? Refresh?
I refreshed the page, yeah. So the reason why it happened is because our server is constantly restarting every time a change is made, even to the Angular app, because of NodeMon. And when the server restarts, it basically flushes all the sessions that are currently in there. So even though we were logged in, it didn't know that. It's now all the sessions have been cleared because NodeMon did its thing. So let's just enter in a email and password here. Okay, so we successfully logged in. You see our little result of success, and then we navigated to the all authors page. If I were to open this up in like an anonymous, let me do new incognito window, and I try to go to my all authors. Notice how I got sent to my login page because it sent that request to see what the current user was. There was no current user, so I got bounced out and sent to the login page. Okay? So that's it. You guys have any questions?
The regex goes into the model for validation.
Oh, yeah. So that's a good question. So inside, if you're trying to,
Regex.
he's basically trying to ask how would we validate that an email address
Oh,
is
yes,
properly
yes.
formed. Yeah, exactly. So inside of our user model, we could have a validate function, which would, so basically this function would take in what the value was, and then you'd do something with that value. So you could do a regex match on that to see if it's proper.
Before you.
Did you say before or after? What? Say it again.
No,
Since sideways.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I'm not fleshing the thing out, but basically you would grab a regex for valid emails, and there are a lot of them out there, and then you check to make sure that that value matches with it. Okay. Any other questions?
That unique is true.
Yeah.
It works for any key in an object. So whatever you put property there, as long as you put it there.
Yeah, should work. Yeah. But again, the error that comes back if it's not unique is gonna be that it's gonna be that 11,000 code.
So we can just store it there and then just display it.
Yeah, you kind of have to look out for that and then know how to handle a non-unique error. Yeah. But probably it's only going to be a maximum of one field in your document that has to be unique. Okay.
Another question is
Mhm.
that so you know how like when you refresh it because Node1 was like
Yeah.
constantly doing that. Is there any way for us to like prevent that then?
If you
Because
if you
whenever
don't
we
run it
use-
with NodeMon, yeah. That would work.
That means whenever I'm using the VS Code and I'm writing something and erasing it, that'll restart the Node1. So it'll kick me out basically. No?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Like we're
but
testing for error.
yeah. So maybe what you might want to do is hold off on, or what you could do is you could suppress your logic that would kick a person out of your app. You know, if they're not logged in, you could basically comment that out as you're doing development so that you don't constantly get kicked out. Yeah, and then apply it once you're a little bit further on in your process of making the app. Yeah, I know it's kind of an inconvenience, but it's just how it is. But it's like, you balance that against the convenience of having NodeMon constantly restarting. That's a pretty nice convenience.
That's true.
You know, so
That's true.
yeah, sometimes you can't have everything, but
Yeah, I have a question.
'Kay.
So in the real world, people love to refresh their page. Would that kick them out?
no, refreshing's not going to kick them out because your server is not restarting.
Okay, so it won't restart.
So their session will still be live as long as their session hasn't expired. So a session will have some kind of life to it depending on what you set, and we can check real quick in the Express session documentation. Whoops. Express. So there's an option in there where you can specify how long you want the cookie to last. So cookie. Let me see. Okay, here it is. So you can have a max age here.
Where? In server updates?
So that would be inside of inside server. You remember when we were using session?
Yeah.
So you'd specify that as an option. So you'd have cookie, and then inside there you could say what the max age is. I can't remember if this is in milliseconds or seconds. Cookie max age. Maybe I should look that up. Set in the options. Oh, here it is. Yeah, max age is in milliseconds. So if I wanted this to be 10 minutes, okay, so then we would go 10 times 60 seconds, and then times 1,000 because they're milliseconds. So that should be 10 minutes. Okay? And that would be a pretty short-lived session if you want to make people log in again after 10 minutes. Probably you'd want something more lenient, maybe like 30 minutes or an hour, something like that. Yeah. So it just means that your server is going to be holding on to the session for a longer amount of time and not forcing them to log back in so often. Okay? You guys didn't fall asleep. I'm so happy. I want to go, have a beer now or something. Let's go party.
Party.
All right. No more questions? You guys feel pretty good about this?
Formulating question.
Or you're formulating one. All right. Just in case our viewers at home have the same question, I will leave the recording on. I will leave the recording on.
So when you deploy this, NodeMon is in front of you,
right? Right. Yeah. NodeMon's not running when you're deploying.
It's
Correct.
okay.
Yep. All right. I will end this.